A great man doesn't seek to lead. He's called to it. And he answers. And if your answer is no, you'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be.
Against the ancestral tombs of Caladan, the intimate exchange between Duke Leto Atreides and his son Paul deconstructs the crushing burden of inherited leadership. This single, meticulously crafted interaction subverts traditional messianic tropes, actively preparing the young protagonist for a destiny that is simultaneously a sacred calling and a fatal snare. It is a study in the jurisprudence of legacy, proving that for House Atreides, the past is always looking over the shoulder of the present.
To grasp this in full, we need to have a little context first.
The relocation of House Atreides from the water-rich world of Caladan to the hostile desert of Arrakis is not a reward, but an orchestrated death sentence engineered by Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV. The emperor is a deeply jealous sovereign who fears the surging political influence of Duke Leto within the Landsraad, the governing parliament of the Great Houses. By granting the Atreides stewardship of the universe's most lucrative and vital fiefdom, the spice-producing planet of Arrakis, the Emperor strategically forces them into a bloody, inevitable conflict with the planet's brutal former rulers, the Harkonnens. This looming political trap, and the necessity of shifting from a military strategy of supremacy to one of radical planetary survival, forces Leto to fundamentally reevaluate how his lineage will endure the impending slaughter. This brings us to this conversation, but apart from this emotional exchange, we have witnessed some marvel of productions as well. Villeneuve meticulously utilizes the geographical and auditory landscape of Caladan to mirror the Atreides' internal reality. Filmed on the rugged Nordfjord coast of Norway, the vertical cliffs and pervasive mist visually represent a history deeply rooted in planetary ecology and ancient stone. This environment, coupled with Hans Zimmer's mournful use of Scottish bagpipes, perfectly encapsulates the soldier's build and poet's eyes of Leto's lineage. Furthermore, the recurring visual motif of the Seleucid bull, referenced directly in the dialogue, acts as a consistent harbinger of death throughout the film. It reinforces the tragedy of their existence. They are a family that refuses to abandon their heavy history, doomed to follow their honorable ideals right into the Emperor's trap, caught in a grand, fatal spectacle, just like the grandfather in the bull ring.
Father, I'd like to ask you to join Duncan Idaho on a scout mission to Arrakis tomorrow. I've studied the Fremen language. I'd be an asset.
Out of the question. They'll travel in a few weeks to Arrakis like the rest of us.
Paul attempted to circumvent the restrictive protocols of his royal bloodline through sheer utilitarian value. By emphasizing his linguistic studies and branding himself an asset, Paul tries to speak to Leto the Duke, framing himself as a tactical resource. Leto's immediate, unyielding denial establishes the rigid boundary of royal protection. He refuses to engage with Paul's tactical argument, reinforcing that Paul is not a soldier to be deployed, but a vital piece on the board that must be preserved at all costs.
I've been training my whole life. What is the point if I'm not allowed to face some
know
actual
why,
risk?
Paul? You're the future of House Atreides.
Paul's frustration boils over as he views his lifelong training as a mandate for immediate physical action. Leto forcefully corrects this misconception by explicitly stating Paul's true, overarching function. Leto strips away the illusion of individual agency. Paul's life does not belong to him. It is the vessel for the house's continuity. Because he is the future, he is strictly prohibited from the luxury and vanity of personal risk.
And grandfather fought bulls for sport.
Yes. Look where that got him.
Denied tactical deployment, Paul weaponizes the family's history, invoking the spectacle of his grandfather, Paulus Atreides, who famously fought Seleucid bulls for sport. It is a desperate attempt to equate leadership with traditional, aggressive heroism. Leto's sharp, devastating retort acts as a chilling memento mori. He ruthlessly dismantles this romanticized vision, framing his father's death as a cautionary tale about the vanity of unnecessary risk. Leto criticizes a lineage that values sport and spectacle over the cold, hard mathematics of survival, firmly establishing that surviving Arrakis will require cold calculation, not grandstanding. At this moment, Leto turns to face Paul, his expression shifting from a distant focus on the horizon to an intimate, somber gaze at his son. This transition marks the move from Leto as the Duke to Leto as the father.
I need you by my side. When we get to Arrakis, we'll face enormous danger.
The physical staging here is profoundly important. As Leto turns, he sheds the rigid, unyielding armor of the Duke and adopts the vulnerable posture of a terrified father. He drops the pretense of a glorious transition of power and admits their severe vulnerability. It is a calculated move to treat Paul not as a subordinate to be managed, but as an heir who must understand the grave reality of their impending doom.
What danger? The Fremen? The desert?
Paul naively assumes the primary threats on Arrakis are purely environmental or indigenous. Leto violently forces the political reality into the conversation.
Political danger. The great houses look to us for leadership, and this threatens the Emperor. By taking Arrakis from the Harkonnens and making it ours, he sets the stage for a war, which would weaken both houses. But if we hold firm and tap the true power of Arrakis, we could be stronger than ever.
Explicitly unmasking the Emperor as the true architect of their peril. He lays bare the geopolitical chessboard, revealing that they are mere pawns in an imperial proxy war. Yet, Leto demonstrates acute, Mentat-like strategic foresight. He identifies this lethal trap not merely as a grave threat, but as an unprecedented opportunity to transcend their current standing, provided they can harness a fundamentally different type of planetary power.
What does that mean? Mining spice, keeping the Fremen in their place? We'd be no better than Harkonnen.
Paul correctly identifies the moral rot of the Harkonnen model, ruling through muscle-level compulsion, oppression, and the brutal extraction of wealth. Leto emphatically rejects this colonial approach.
No, by making an alliance with the Fremen.
Introducing the Atreides voice, a leadership philosophy rooted in persuasion, loyalty, and a strategic partnership with the native population.
Here on Caladan, we've ruled by air power and sea power. On Arrakis, we need to cultivate desert power.
By acknowledging the obsolescence of their air and sea power, Leto accepts a terrifying truth. The great houses are fundamentally dwarfed by the sheer, devastating scale of nature on Arrakis. True desert power requires joining the environment and its native people, rather than attempting to conquer them.
I want you sitting in on my council. Learn what I do.
Leto is demanding Paul learn this new, radical mechanism of survival by sitting on his council. Paul hesitates, the weight of the future clearly pressing upon him. The landscape around them, ancient and unchanging, seems to reinforce the inevitability of his path.
What if I'm not, Dad?
Not what?
The future of House Atreides.
The physical architecture of the monolithic brutalist tombs visually reinforces the inescapable, suffocating weight of the past. Paul's hesitation is a profound expression of psychological dread. He is deeply questioning his own capacity to survive the massive biological and political destiny mandated to him. In this moment, the confident tactical student completely dissolves, leaving behind a terrified boy cracking under the weight of an empire.
I told my father I didn't want this either. I wanted to be a pilot.
You never told me that.
Leto shatters the stereotypical epic fantasy trope of the eager, destined leader. By confessing his own past desire to simply be a pilot, Leto radically humanizes the daunting, intimidatingly great man he has had to become. He frames leadership not as a divine right or an ambitious, glorious prize, but as a heavy, restrictive burden that must be reluctantly shouldered. This confession bridges the gap between them, turning a royal decree into a shared, painful experience.
Your grandfather said, A great man doesn't seek to lead. He's called to it. And he answers.
This is the absolute philosophical anchor of the film. Leto imparts a crucial distinction. True leadership is a duty that one is called to, fundamentally rejecting the ambitious, malevolent greed of the Harkonnens. Most importantly, Leto explicitly validates the option of refusal.
And if your answer is no, you'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be. My son.
By assuring Paul he is valued primarily as a son, Leto provides a critical emotional safety net that defies cold institutional directives. This grounding physical touch stands in stark contrast to the Bene Gesserit, who view Paul purely as a freakish biological asset to be tested through searing pain. Leto instead bolsters Paul's resolve through profound love, asking him only to give it a try in the memory of their ancestors, successfully planting the seed for Paul to eventually choose his path rather than simply succumb to a prophecy. The interaction at the Caladan cemetery is arguably the most vital character-building sequence in Villeneuve's massive adaptation of Dune. Its profound importance lies not merely in its elegant exposition of the Emperor's lethal political trap, but in its absolute, heartbreaking deconstruction of legacy, duty, and the illusion of free will. By situating this conversation among the imposing, monolithic tombs of their ancestors, the film literalizes the immense, suffocating weight of the past that Paul must either carry or ultimately unlearn. This scene marks the definitive narrative catalyst for the entire epic, the precise moment where Leto shifts his governance from the obsolescence of sea power compulsion to the strategic, respectful, and necessary alliance of desert power. Yet, the lasting and most devastating impact of this sequence is deeply emotional. In a universe governed by malevolent forces, treacherous weather events, and cold biological calculus, Leto offers an anchoring moment of fierce humanity. His ultimate legacy is not the ducal signet ring, the strength of the Atreides military, or the immense wealth of the spice trade. Instead, it is the radical, unconditional permission he grants his son to define his own personhood. By validating Paul's fear and explicitly offering him the freedom to say no, Leto equips him with the psychological resilience necessary to survive the coming slaughter. This exchange ensures that when Paul finally steps into the desolate sands of Arrakis, he does so not as a pawn of Bene Gesserit prophecy or a victim of imperial jealousy, but as a leader who found his own way. He survives the Mind Killer because he was called to greatness, and he actively chose to answer.